Welcome to ReFocus, a podcast that helps you find your focus to build a thriving creative career in the music industry. I'm your host, Rosalyn Dennett. Hello and welcome to ReFocus. Our guest today is Anna Ruddick. Anna is a graduate of McGill University's Jazz Performance Program and postgraduate studies in Arts Administration and Cultural Management at Humber College. In her young career, Anna has risen to become one of the most in-demand and versatile bassists in Canada. She has performed on more than 50 studio albums spanning across many genres. Some of her notable recording work includes Randy Bachman's power trio album Heavy Blues, Bry Webb's critically acclaimed studio album Free Will, and live album Live at Massey Hall, Paul Reddick's 2017 Juno Award-winning album Ride the One, and Lee Harvey Osmond's 2020 Juno Award-winning album Mohawk. In addition to her session work, Anna has performed live and toured with a who's who of Canadian and international artists, most notably City in Colour, Fifi Dobson, Amanda Reume, Aaron Costello, and Ian Blurton's quartet Future Now. After over a decade as a full-time working musician, Anna is passionate about advocating for the financial and emotional well-being of Canadian music industry workers and has been working with the Unison Fund, Canada's music charity, since 2020 as manager of industry relations. Welcome, Anna. How are you doing?
I'm doing good.
It's so nice to have you here.
Thank you so much for having me.
I know. Today, we are both in the same situation, being working music industry moms with sick kids at home. That's fun.
Yeah. I don't think I've been completely well for about 6 months. I've had some form of a cold or something for about 6 months.
And I'm wondering if we can start by chatting about the Unison Fund and your work there, and maybe talk a little bit about some of the services that you folks offer.
Yeah, absolutely. Currently, we have 2 mental health counseling programs that we partner with. One is LifeWorks, which is sponsored by RBC, and this is a free mental health counseling service that is done over the phone. It's free for any Unison member, so any Canadian music worker and their immediate family. The way that it works is you call the toll-free number and you are triaged to a therapist. This can be a psychologist, family therapist, or social worker that's right for your needs. And it's really cool because they'll ask you a bunch of questions about what's going on in your life and then actually find somebody that's the right person to assist you with that. And then you can have just weekly phone calls, just like regular therapy, but over the phone. And I've used it before and it is really, really, really helpful and really specific to your needs, actually. So we've seen a massive increase in subscription to this, obviously, over the pandemic. And it's just really, really, really helpful to have that because we support 15,000 Canadian music workers who would have otherwise had to pay out of pocket for therapy with this service. And it's really tough to afford therapy as a music worker. We don't have health insurance or anything like that that's going to cover it for us. So this is really, really amazing resource that we're really trying to get the word out about.
Yeah, I've also used that service through Unison. It was particularly helpful for me postpartum, just needing to talk to someone. And I was really, really impressed with how quick the service was. You just call and somebody's going to answer. They're kind and understanding and just ask you the questions to get you the help that you need. It's done through LifeWorks. So it's not like you're calling Unison and talking to Anna and being like, Anna, this is what's up in my life. It's a little bit more anonymous.
Yeah, it's so nice to hear you talk about it. As somebody that's used the service, that's really awesome to hear that you've had a good experience with it. And the postpartum thing, I used it for that as well. And I used the service to talk to a family therapist because I have a shared custody situation and all of the moving parts surrounding that can be really, really stressful when you're a working musician and a working mom or just for anyone. And I saw a family therapist there who gave me a ton of tools to use to help myself through that situation. And that's kind of what I was asking for. Traditional therapy sometimes makes me feel nervous to be so vulnerable. And so for me at that time, I was like, can you just give me tools to deal with certain situations? And she was amazing. And that's exactly what she did. And yeah, I just wanted to tell that story about my own use of the program because I think that's helpful for people to hear about it firsthand. They also will send, when I was about to have my last child, they sent me, a bunch of books about parenting and stuff. It's cute. They ask you about your situation and then they actually send you things in the mail that will help you. It's really cool. So
is that the same program? Because I know that in the past you've done some assistance with like folks who might need help with groceries or, with their like physical
Yeah.
health, like getting folks Fitbits or a certain.
It's not. No, the LifeWorks program is the counseling and mental health. LifeWorks will also help with like a bunch of other things that we need, like, just advice about family life, finding child and elder care, legal advice, workplace advice, financial management, nutrition, addiction, all those sorts of things. What you are describing is our industry assistance program. So that program, which is the initial program that we had for the first 10 years before the pandemic, where music workers who were in a crisis, something has happened where they can't work or they need emergency financial assistance for like health related things. Well, like you were saying, I need money for groceries. I didn't have a gig this month, like that type of thing. There's all sorts of reasons why a music worker will suddenly not be able to work. As you can imagine, there's just a whole list of things that can happen. As I was saying before, because we don't have access to the same social securities as regular insured workers, Unison is there to sort of like help out. So if you break your arm, for example, and you can't play a gig, we can pay your rent for a month and so on and so forth while you recover. That's kind of what the Unison Fund exists for. It's just to help out musicians and music workers who are in a crisis or having a mental health crisis or having a physical crisis or a health issue. There needed to be something there for us, and there is now with Unison.
Can you tell me a little bit about the financial support that Unison has offered and how that works?
Yeah, absolutely. So as I was explaining before the pandemic, we had an industry assistance program to help people that were in a crisis. As you can imagine, the past 3 years were a crisis for the entire music community. So for the first time, we received money from both the provincial Ontario government and the federal government. Unison had never received government funding before, but we did. And we dispersed financial assistance payments to 7,000 people since July 2022 with the Performing Arts Workers Resilience Fund, our fund being the Live Music Workers Fund. That was payments of $2,500 to anyone who had worked full-time in music for at least 2 years before the pandemic. And yeah, that was 7,000 people. And there is probably still more. And it was wonderful to just grow the organization exponentially, hire a whole bunch of new people, and just get the money out to everybody who needed it. And it was really great. We are now in between programs because we've been just on all hands on deck providing that funding to people. And then in the spring, we will relaunch our financial assistance programs, which will look the same as it did before the pandemic. People can apply for financial assistance for various things, various reasons why they can't work, if something's happened, various crises, various health issues. And we will also be launching a new program called the Legacy Program. And this is a financial assistance program for music industry veterans and people with long-term health concerns. As we know, music workers don't usually retire, and when they receive a pension, it's just not usually going to be enough. So we just really want to help our veterans and make sure that people can live comfortably in their senior years.
Oh, that's incredible. You mentioned 7,000 applications. Were you the person that was helping administer those payments? Like, were you involved in that?
Yeah, I was involved in the Live Music Workers Fund in several different capacities. I worked with, and we, Unison, all of us worked with a steering committee of individuals from various provincial music industry associations, Advance, the Indigenous Music Summit, 5X Festival, just every equity deserving group and every provincial group. A committee of people basically was put in place to do outreach for this funding because the Unison Fund was quite small and then had a 600% increase in membership, during the pandemic. So we had to make sure we reached every corner of the music industry. And so I worked with them to make sure that everybody in the industry knew about this fund and could apply for it, to find out what translations we needed, to find out what barriers are in place for people applying for the funding. And they were amazing, so indispensable to us. And, we're going to keep working with a lot of those people on our steering committee because it's just so helpful to have that outreach. And yeah, I also worked hands-on with the applicants, talked to a lot of people on the phone, did approvals, just tried to help the funding team make sure that we could get through everybody. But yeah, it was just it was a sort of all hands on deck approach. And I was really lucky to be able to, work in various capacities with this and see how it was working and how it was helping people. I really liked the part of the work that involved speaking to people and hearing people's stories and getting a real sense of how things were, really reading the barometer of what was happening in the music industry. When I say I liked it, I mean, it was very challenging because it was very clear to me in speaking to our applicants, people that were very, very, very hardworking and successful, if you want to use that word. I have a hard time using that word because what does that mean? But before the pandemic, but had really lost all of their savings and things like that, not working. People were having housing issues was a big one that really, really was tough to hear about. Housing insecurity, as as a musician, is something that we sort of have to deal with for the first 10 years of our career, basically, because if you want to be a musician, you're going to have to really pay your dues and not make a lot of money. We've all gone through that. I mean, mostly. And hearing that people have you get older and you start figuring out your career and you make money. And then this pandemic created a situation where it threw people back into that early phase of their career when they weren't making enough money to pay the rent and things like that. And it's just backtracking like that is so hard for us, right? That was tough.
Yeah, and that must have been heavy to be the person fielding all that and really an industry in crisis and folks in crisis. You mentioned that all that financial insecurity, and as you mentioned in your bio, you are someone who talks about financial wellness for artists, and that's something that you're passionate about. Maybe you can talk a little bit about financial insecurity and kind of the ebb and flow of that lifestyle and some of the tips you might have for strengthening your financial wellness and literacy.
That's a big question. And, I have to state that I am by no means an expert in financial wellness, but I come from a place of having experienced a long career in music and every stage of a career in music. And one thing I like to tell people is that, if you're going to be a musician, you have to be okay with a certain level of ebb and flow when it comes to finances. You have to not beat yourself up that your income is so much lower than your friends or family members who have regular quote unquote jobs. It's a long, long path to reaching financial stability, and you're making a big sacrifice to be an artist or a musician or a music worker, but your passion is why you're doing it, and your talent is why you're doing it. But you have to go easy on yourself because there's no two ways about it. It's a really hard career choice to make money in. Being as informed as you possibly can about, things like doing your taxes as a self-employed music worker, getting a really good accountant, creating a personal budget for yourself, finding a side hustle that is complementary to your music is really, really important because, and especially if you live in somewhere like Toronto or a major center, when you're a bit younger in your career, you're probably going to have a second income. And there's lots of different things that you can do to find something that's compatible with your music.
I'm interested in talking for a second about the side hustle, because I think it's something that folks certainly don't often promote, that side of what they're doing, on social media or whatever. It's all about the gigs and the fun side of it, the music work. They might not be promoting that, hey, I'm waiting tables, or here's me cleaning floors here, or whatever, the other side of it. And you mentioned finding that side hustle that's kind of congruous with your music career. Do you have some examples of some things that folks may seek out as side work that you've seen kind of work for yourself or other people?
Yeah. One thing I sort of, especially post-pandemic, want to normalize is the fact that we're all getting a side hustle, or not everybody, but younger musicians. And it's because it's important to be financially secure, and you're not always going to have the same amount of gigs every month. Examples of things that people are doing. And I like what you said about how you don't see what people's side hustles are on social media. And it's everything always comes back to that. But, half of the people out there bartending or waiting tables work, which is very lucrative, and there's nothing to be ashamed of. And I mean, that is seriously hard work and really important work. The service industry is great for musicians because you can kind of come in and out, and you can create a community there and know different people. Some people work at 2 or 3 different places or do replacement work. Some people work for backline companies if they want to be closer to a music environment or stage tech work. There's an amazing resource called the Work and Culture Job Board, where they have temp work. Maybe it'll be handing out brochures at a concert hall or something like that. Tons of temp work there in culture, which is great. I always tell people about the Work and Culture Job Board because there's just so much temporary employment there that's close to the arts and if that's what's comfortable and that's the space people want to be in still when they're not making their own music or creating. It's really helpful that resource is there because there's a lot of work there, especially in the summertime when there's a lot of festivals and things like that. There's just tons of extra work that we can look for there. So it's good. I discovered that resource when I was doing my postgraduate certificate in arts administration, cultural management at Humber. That was like a resource that they gave us right away when we were looking for internships and things like that. And I was like, wow, this is amazing. This is something that like more music workers should know about when they're just needing that extra employment, because there's just a lot there. And, you know, there's also jobs there within the music industry as well if people are looking for like a more permanent side hustle. Like myself, I've got 2 kids and I sort of stopped touring full time. And, you know, I did that program at Humber so I could work for the Unison Fund. And this work, you know, I still work quite full time as a musician when I'm not doing this, but it's very complementary to that. Just have to find something that is sort of complementary to your music work, because music is always going to come first for all of us. But it's just about finding something to do for money that doesn't take away from your art.
Yeah, and it's an interesting balance, and it's pretty awesome if you can find a place like where you've landed that understands that. I've certainly, like, when interviewing for jobs or seeking out different jobs in the industry, sometimes you don't know how hard to lean into and I'm an artist. Sometimes it's, you know, I've certainly worked places where that's like, oh no, they're an artist. And other places where they're like, oh my gosh, you're an artist. This is perfect. This aligns with what we do. So I feel like either way, you know, being honest about what your schedule could be like, you know, or making sure that there is some, you know, if you can build some flexibility in, that's really important. And then also like advocating for the value that artists bring to whatever they're doing, you know, whether it's, you know, working in a desk job or shoveling gravel. It's like, you know, we're hard workers. We're entrepreneurs. We're, you know, folks that quite often have had a hand in every aspect of our own business. We can give ourselves more credit than sometimes we do. That's
such an excellent point about, it's kind of hire a musician, you'll get a hardworking person, but that's absolutely true. I mean, we are all sort of entrepreneurs and self-made people, and as independent artists, we know how to do a lot. We know how to like really rise to an occasion and really hustle. And yeah, I know what you mean about some workplaces being really, really apprehensive about hiring musicians, because again, it's that thing where we are assumed to be people that are not in a serious profession, or it's not a real job or something like that. But then there are places that are like, wow, I'd love to hire a musician because they see the value. This job is one where it's very frustrating. People might think that we are not in a serious profession, or people might really appreciate us or really, really value us because we're musicians and we're very interesting to them. But there's a lot of like prejudice there too, because maybe we're seen as people that aren't taking like the way the real world works seriously or something like that. It's just, yeah.
Add to that also the stress or responsibility of caring for others too. It's like a whole other level for folks who are in that sort of situation as caregivers at whatever type of stage of life they're at. Can you share a little bit about your experience of being a touring artist while having a family?
Yeah, absolutely. In my non-Unison work, I am a touring and session bass player. So I always work in a capacity where somebody is hiring me to play bass for them and play their music and make them sound good. So it's a different perspective than you know, being the artist themselves, having children and dealing with that. I am somebody that is being hired by people, and I also have children. So I've had a lot of experience with just having to separate the two, and it can be really hard. It can be really lonely, you know, sort of being out there and like leaving your family at home. But I've found a way over time to sort of like pick work where there'll be some sort of understanding of the fact that I've got kids at home. Like I haven't historically brought my children on tour that much. I have absolutely when I had one child, my daughter Lenny, who's almost 5. When she was a baby, I was able to tour with a few people that would allow me to bring her, which was so incredible. That felt really good to be like valued enough that I could bring like my baby. And it was kind of nice for everybody. She was like I do have a disclaimer. She was a very easy baby and did not sort of cry a lot and slept very well at night. So, I mean, I wouldn't bring a baby on tour as a hired gun that was going to scream and make everybody not get any sleep. But anyway, that was really lovely. And I've most of the touring I did obviously wouldn't have been appropriate to bring any of my children on the road and things like that. But it is doable. The main thing there is you need a support system, right? So if your parents are nearby and they're willing to help and things like that, that makes it easier. I was leaving my daughter with my mom, and she was happy to look after Lenny. I was a single mom with my first child, so that was part of it. And now, like, my partner stays home with them when I go away, but I don't go away for very long when I go away. You know, I just tour with people that are, you know, less than a week and things like that. It's tough for sure. And it's the main part of it that's tough is when you've got kids and you're going away on the road is the guilt. It is just, it's that crippling guilt. Well, I'm a mother. I shouldn't be the one that's leaving my kids at home. This is not what women do or whatever. Like, this isn't fair to my partner, every spiraling thing. So what I can recommend is in those situations, like you really just keep the lines of communication with whoever your caregiver for your children is while you're not there open. Keep the lines of communication open. How can I help? Does this make you feel a certain way? It's a lot of communication because you've got to just really, like, you're out there doing your job and you have to focus on it. And it can be frustrating to be constantly distracted by those kind of feelings when you're gone. But it's normal. Your kids know that you're their mom or you're their dad and that you're going to come back, and they get used to anything because children are very adaptable. And throughout history, like, so many touring artists had children and had to leave them behind. And it's about what you do in your home and being present. And, we have little traditions around, like, when mommy comes home from the road, we do this. And like, I always bring them presents, or, we have a special dinner, or, and we talk before I leave about like where I'm going. And I tell them about the different cities that I'll be visiting. And I FaceTime 4 times a day, stuff like that. Just do your due diligence. And it's really not that detrimental to them. Mm. We have to work, but we also deserve to have children. And it's not like if you're a musician, you shouldn't have kids, because we make really good parents. As you know, like, you're a musician who has had children. You probably found it easier to get up at 3 a.m. because you've been awake at 3 a.m. so many times.
That's very true. But I like also touching on the feminist issue of women working and being the non-male caregiver and the extra expectation that's on you to be the parent at home, or not to be the person that's leaving. It's I think that there is like an extra pressure on women to be the first to sacrifice their career.
I was playing a gig the other weekend, and one of the individuals in the opening band, one of their musicians, was talking about how she was replacing somebody who had a baby. And I was like, how old is the baby? Or 6 months old, or whatever the case may be. And it was just, I just thought to myself, why isn't she playing this gig? Because she has a baby. And it's just, I keep hearing that over and over again. And like, that is also perhaps her decision, which is great if it is. But I hear a lot about women just, taking a lot of time off from their music because they have a baby. And I'm just like, how can we help this situation? How can I explain to people that there are things you can do? How can we make it normal for her to bring that baby? Because I'm like, we're playing a rock show, but like, the baby would probably just sleep backstage. Like, it's an unbelievable how much they're like, you're like, how are they asleep? It's like so loud. I don't know. But anyway, and I'm coming at this from not a place of judgment, but just a place of being like, I want this woman to be able to play this show. How come she can't? Because she had a baby. I think there just has to be more conversations about this, because people have children and women are musicians. And we're getting to a point where we're seeing so many more female and non-binary musicians, when it used to be like a lot of dudes up there all the time. Right. So with that information, there's going to be more children around, and more people are going to have babies and that are musicians, and we can't just expect them to sort of like stop playing because of that. So I don't know what the answer is, but I want people to just know that it's possible. I really enjoyed bringing my family to the FMO conference this year and doing the work-life balance panel and like having my kids there. It was so awesome. Like, I have to tell you, it was a really great experience. I felt really, really comfortable having my children there with me, and they really loved it. And it was like really nice to bring them to showcases. And it's so nice to have them with me when I'm working so that they can see what I do, because that is one thing, like, that's why I think it's great when you can bring your kids around what you're doing for work. Like, I often bring them to the studio just for a visit and things like that. It's so nice for them to know what their parents are doing and like what work it is and what it is to be a musician. Lenny, my 5-year-old, came to my sound check with Future Now the other day. This is like an extremely loud metal band. And she like hid under the table with earplugs in under my jacket. But she was like, that was so cool after. And it's cool. Like, it's good to show them what it is. I'm like, it's going to be loud, Lenny, and it's really probably not your thing. But she's like, no, I want to see what you're doing.
That's so neat to be able to create spaces that you can include your family or loved ones in. It's neat in that way too. That's like a whole other thing, but that's kind of the nature of the beast in some ways, is that folks are so participatory in what you do, right?
Yeah. I have to say, like, just for anyone listening to this that's an artist that has to hire musicians like myself to play in your band, one thing I would suggest, I've seen this a lot, somebody saying, yeah, this person was going to hire you, but like, because you have kids, they, went with somebody else, instead of asking if I tour. Like, ask somebody who's a parent And like, if they're a dad too, like, I know people usually are like, well, he has kids, obviously he can still tour. But hiring women and non-binary folks and people that are parents like isn't necessarily a bad idea. This is somebody that is hardworking and responsible and has to support themselves and their family. It's not a bad idea if you like somebody the way that somebody plays and you want to hire them. If they have kids and you're nervous about that, it's really okay to ask questions of that person. If you're an artist that maybe doesn't know what that's like or what that looks like, instead of just assuming that because somebody has children that they're not able to work or travel or go to a studio all day, ask. Always ask. And that is how conversations happen. And that is how things get normalized. And it's just really, really important. There's just so many moms now that are musicians that need to be hired. And, it's normal to have women on stage. And a lot of that has really, really changed. And that's great. But, that means there's going to be moms and parents and things like that. So it's not rude to ask, like, how does this work? I don't know. If you're not a parent, you can ask somebody how that works because you don't know. And that's totally fine.
Yeah, and just normalize the conversation. If people are open to talking about it and advocating for your needs and your family's needs and just having the conversation, I think is such an amazing first step to have.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, when we're talking about carrying that extra responsibility, but even just kind of going back to the flow of financial health in general and the kind of income instability that precarious workers have, can we just dive in for a minute into some of the advice that you would have for budgeting and cash flow and that sort of thing?
As I said before, I am by no means an expert in this. It's funny, when I did my postgrad certificate at Humber, I had a financial management class, which involved budgets, spreadsheets, financial statements and all that kind of stuff. And it was like so interesting to learn about this. And it got me thinking, and also we talked about tax brackets and like write-offs and all that kind of stuff, some of which I knew as a self-employed person for many years. But it got me thinking about that education piece. It's like, I went to McGill for the jazz performance program. It's a sort of prestigious music university program in Canada at McGill, really hard jazz program. And you go through this program and become, great at playing and, knowing the history of this music and playing it. And nobody's teaching you how to get gigs. You figure that out because you have a community and, you kind of hustle and figure out what you need to be doing to kind of make some money. But there's no class. I don't know if there is now, but like 20 years ago when I was in university, there was no class about financial management in my music program. Obviously, there's one in my arts administration class, but like in the performance program, which is training musicians to go out there and be musicians, it should exist. It's so important that you know how to do your taxes and how to write things off and like what you can write off and like how to make a personal budget, things like that, like how much money you need to make per month to be able to sustain yourself and like how you can do that and just getting organized. Like, a lot of us are disorganized people. We're artists, we're musicians, we're creatives. Half of us are neurodivergent. I am. It's so important to like learn all this stuff. And you're a young musician studying or coming up. It's just, there's not a lot of stress on it. And I think like that's the biggest piece of advice I can give is just to have a really good accountant and learn a little bit about how to make a personal budget, how to do your taxes, what your needs are. It's obviously messy in the beginning of your career and, it's just so inconsistent. That's what we were talking about before about why Unison exists, because it can just all sort of go away and for no reason you'll have nothing and there just won't be a gig. It's just, it's all dependent upon so many different moving parts that have nothing to do with you or your talent or how hardworking you are. So it's things like, hey, how much money do you think I should have put aside? A very difficult task, obviously, with like this gig economy, but like, if you can, a couple of months of a safety net, which many of us had before the pandemic, and obviously none of us have now because we've depleted our savings if we live in any kind of bigger city. But those kinds of things it's just something to think about. It's so easy to ignore it and just kind of put the blinders on and forge ahead, which is also good. It's just, you got to do what you got to do. But yeah, I just recommend sort of spending a little bit of time with that. And fortunately we have the internet and finding resources for that is fairly easy. But yeah, just, personal budgets, making sure you do your taxes every single year so you know what's happening year to year, because unfortunately we're at the mercy of the CRA and we have to play their game. It's very important to do so. You can get into some sort of sticky situations. But if you have a really good year, if you switch to a new income bracket, if you need to collect HST, all of that stuff is really, really important to be aware of, because you can get into real trouble if you kind of don't do your taxes for a couple of years. Make too much money one year, you're going to owe the CRA back. And then how do you get on a payment plan to do that? It's just, we have enough going on in trying to organize a career in the arts and music it's just important to do your due diligence for yourself, to just take that extra layer of stress off. Financial wellness is just tied to every other aspect of our personal well-being. Unfortunately, in this like world that we live in, it can really like affect our health. And be stressed out about money. So it's important to just try to be kind to yourself and just try to, take it slow and figure out a way to just personally budget your month. Just put a little bit of money aside and to just know how your tax situation works. It's just all of those like little things. You don't have to be an expert.
Well, speaking about being kind to yourself, do you have some perspective to share about, kind of the general wellness for folks that are working in the music space, and whether that's like health or mental health, and how people can support their own well-being?
What we do have in the music community is that sense of community. And I think talking about what's going on and like finding like-minded people, being able to express yourself, being able to be vulnerable, and just, talking with people in your community about how you're feeling is really, really important. As I said, I'm very happy to tell you guys about the free counseling that we have at Unison. Talking to somebody who's a professional over the phone in this case is so helpful. It's really important that music workers take the time to take care of their own mental health, because it's just a really, really hard career, and people need to know that they're deserving of that health. Sometimes it feels like we're not deserving, or we're not used to deserving basic things, because we don't get a paycheck with like our pension taken off of it. We don't have access to EI if like we can't work. We don't have access to maternity leave if we want to have children. So sometimes we can feel like we're not members of society who are appreciated, but music workers are incredibly necessary, because the economy makes millions of dollars off of music, the live music space, like all of it. We are deserving of wellness, financial and otherwise. So talk to people, talk to a professional, talk to your friends, keep the conversation flowing so that things can be more normalized. Because the more mental health struggles, financial struggles, and all of that, even that thing you said before about like, we don't know what people do as their side work because nobody posts it on social media. Be authentic on social media. The more people are authentic and the more people talk about what's going on, really, the more this will work, and the more that the community will be in a more positive, open space. I really just want to impart that knowledge that things will get better as long as they're normalized. And we all go through the same sorts of struggles, and we all only post the cool gig that we have on social media. But unfortunately, social media is just this superficial thing that can showcase to our audience and our fans what we're doing. But there's also our community of other musicians and music workers, and we should be real with each other.
Yeah, I really love that part of like connecting with other musicians about it. I think sometimes people are scared too, because I think it's hard to admit that you're struggling, and especially when you also have kind of like a working relationship with people, there's almost that like office type vibe where you might not, want to get into, you kind of might be trepidatious about sharing a struggle with someone who's like a potential coworker in some ways, because you might feel weird being that vulnerable. But I think that you're right. This is an industry that's built on community. It's refreshing to be able to have those conversations. I think that the neat thing about emerging out of the pandemic is that some of those barriers have been taken down a bit, or at least there's more kind of open conversations now about mental health and people's struggles. We can all know that we were struggling because we were all doing it. So yeah. I think that conversation is becoming hopefully a little bit more normalized for some folks. And also, I don't do it too often, but I will say that that's one of the nice things about FMO, if I can give a little plug for, or any kind of conference, really, like any of those kind of big gatherings of musicians, that's always a big highlight, is getting to have that kind of bigger community connection. When we did the ReFolkUs wellness sessions at the conference where we had Cindy in doing group therapy sessions, and that room was full. She was talking about the emotional impact of being able to open up with a group of people who are experiencing similar things. And it was a really neat program to have happen at the conference.
The conference was wonderful. It was a sense of community I don't think I've ever seen. And it was this past season has been my first time going to conferences as a delegate, not as a musician who's just playing a gig there. So I really threw myself into the mix. You can see that the energy has shifted, because honestly, like a conference like that would have made me just really nervous and like, oh my God, what's going to happen at this thing before the pandemic? But you could, the sense of community there was just like inspiring. Like, honestly, it was incredible. Things have changed. The pandemic was horrifying, and a lot of people got sick, and we lost a lot of people. We also lost a lot of people in the community because of the pandemic and because of their mental health and not being able to hang on to their mental health. A lot of people. And so enough is enough. We have to just have these conversations about mental health. We have to not hide behind like a persona that is not ourselves in that moment because we're scared that we won't get hired if there's something wrong or if there's something that's bothering us. Because one thing the pandemic has taught us is that community and that is really, really important. And mental health is really, really important because we lost people and we can't keep losing people because they feel like they can't be helped.
So can you tell me about Together All? Which is a new program that Unison is offering, which I think kind of applies to this chat about community support.
Yeah, absolutely. And so one thing that's like obviously daunting is talking to your actual peers face to face about things that you're going through. And it's funny, like we're having this conversation. I'm like, oh yeah, we have to mention Together All because Together All is like an online community. It's a peer-to-peer mental health support community. It's like people support each other and it's anonymous. And it improves mental well-being. You can express yourself creatively on there. You can find others who are having the same feelings and thoughts. On good days, you can support other people. On bad days, you can get support. And giving back can be so positive in any recovery situation or crisis. So you find an anonymous name and you go on and you can find like, there's a music workers page on Together All and you can go and speak to people and talk about what you're going through. It's completely anonymous and safe. And it's monitored 24/7 by mental health professionals. So it's nice. It's like a place where you can go be yourself and talk openly about your struggles with the rest of your community, like similar community. As I said, there's a music workers section in Together All, but there are those mental health professionals, like they're called wall monitors because you're sort of like posting on a wall, overseeing things. So if there's something that's really wrong or you're feeling like you're in a crisis, they will intervene and like help you. They're keeping you at arm's length and they're letting people discuss, but it is being monitored. So it's a really nice thing. You can feel really safe there. It's like the whole thing about Together All is to be a safe space to meet others like yourself. And I love that moderation aspect of it because that like if things escalate with you, somebody that's a professional is going to be there to like come in and be like, hey, what's going on? Are you okay? And I really love that. It just feels like a really safe space. And we're at Unison, like we're partnered with them and we're just really hoping that it takes off a little bit. We have some subscription to it from members, but I want to encourage more people to get on there just to start that conversation, just to start being able to express yourself. And it's anonymous is really, really good because it's super hard to express yourself to people that you know. And sometimes that anonymity can help you. I know, like I've been in therapy before even and been like, oh, I don't want to tell the therapist, like, I want to seem like I'm okay and seem impressive and like I have my whole like shit together. It's like, that's why you're there is because you don't. And it just can be really daunting because as music workers, we are just so good at putting our best self forward and like burying all the other shit. We're masking all the time. And that's part of our work. Like part of our work is being charming and like being a literal product. Right. And what I like about Together All is that anonymity and that like, that knowledge that it's being moderated. And I think it could be really cool for more music workers to use this platform. It's just an online forum. So it's not kind of like, I want to say it's like Reddit, but it's very different because that's a whole other thing. But if anybody's interested in using that and just checking it out, it's really cool. And I think it'll be cooler the more people use it and the more people in our community use it. And it's free as a Unison member. So if you go to the website, unisonfund.ca, you can get all the information about it there.
Great. And we'll link to that in the notes as well so people can find out more about it. And where can people find out more about you?
I have a website. It's just annaruddick.com. And I post all my gigs up there and all my discography. And I try to remember to actually update it. I was on there the other day, like, I should write my gigs down. I'm like, oh my God, like the last thing I listed on here was 6 months ago. And I've played like 50 shows since then. So, but I'm a mom and sometimes I'm disorganized, everyone. So,
well, thank you. Thank you so much for being here and taking time out of a busy day to chat with us. I really appreciate it, Anna.
Anytime.
That's it for this episode of Refocus. Please subscribe, rate, and review on the podcast app of your choice so you never miss an episode. For more information, you can visit us at folkmusicontario.org and follow us on social media at folkmusicontario. This Refocus session is brought to you through the generous support of the Department of Canadian Heritage.